Thanks, Adam. So yeah, this is the last fireside of the day, and then we do a pitch competition. So this is going to be really hot. And after that, we do the after party. So yeah, stay tuned for that. I'm very excited to talk about stablecoins a little bit. I think we're gonna probably like hijack the topic a little bit. Topic is like, could USDC become a better collateral for restaking than ETH? But we're gonna like see where we take this. You guys at Reserve, maybe you want to say quickly like what you are working on actually, and then we take it from there.
Sure. Hi everybody, I'm Thomas Mattimore. I lead the ABC Labs company, which is the protocol development company for Reserve. Reserve is a protocol that lets anyone launch a stablecoin or a money market-like or ETF-like product. We launched 2 years ago. There's $300 million of TVL on the platform today, and we actually have the largest LST index in DeFi, which is one of the things that I'm excited about the staking summit for.
Amazing. So obviously we had a lot of talks about shared security and restaking today. Like, what is your take on shared security and restaking? How do you approach it from Reserve?
Yeah, we actually have a very similar model that is employed in our governance layer. There's, the word staking is thrown around in DeFi quite a bit, and sometimes people actually put capital at stake and sometimes they don't. And we in our governance model, you can use the governance token in order to decide if you're going to put money at stake on any of the individual assets. In exchange for staking your capital, you get to participate in governance decisions and basket decisions. And if there's any issues with your own decisions, then your money is at stake and can be used for recollateralization. And so.
Amazing. So I understand you have different index tokens, right? For example, you have the biggest LST index, and then for the governance token, you can stake into the index of the LST, right?
Exactly right. There's so all of these things are yield bearing of the underlying yield. Some of it can be used for going back to the token holders themselves, and some of it can go to the governance layer. And very similar to all these other different DeFi models, the revenue gets routed in different ways.
Awesome. And how does it work? Is there any slashing, or like how do you incentivize like the performance of the different indexes? Because that's probably the main reason why you can stake into it, right? Or...
Exactly right. So 2 years ago, or I guess it was about 1.5 years ago, do people remember the Silicon Valley Bank USDC DPEG?
Yeah.
People being and so that was actually right after we had launched the protocol. And what happened was USDC lost its peg, and the protocol, noticed that, saw the oracles change, and then sold off that USDC and recollateralized with some of the governance token.
All right. So you also have a stablecoin index token that basically takes USDC and other collateral, and then whenever something is happening, it optimizes. To prevent any risks.
Exactly right. And so that's for any of the indexes. For the ETH LST index, for instance, in the case of slashing, if any, if Lido or Rocket or Stater or FraxETH were to lose some of its value against the Oracle, then the governance layer would come in and make up the difference.
Awesome. And then are these index tokens, like the stablecoin index or the ETH index, can these also be used again for like restaking or shared security, for example, in Eigenlayer or Symbiotic? Is that something that you guys are looking into? Or?
Definitely. When restaking became a big part of the narrative, we definitely explored it. It was one of the ETH Plus, which is the LST index on our platform. It was pretty small at the time, and so it didn't make a lot of sense. But now that it's a $150 million asset, it's much more viable to be used in these restaking platforms.
Awesome. And is the index only from LSTs or also from LRTs? And yeah, how are you watching that?
At the moment, it's LSTs only. The mandate from the original launch was to be an LST index, and so it's a very different risk profile if you also add in the restaking. And so the holders and the governors have opted to keep it as LSTs for now, which makes it a much more prime asset for restaking.
Yeah. how do you decide which tokens to add to the index actually? Because that's obviously like pretty similar to restaking as well. You need to assess the different risks, right? And then yeah, assign allocations to it.
100%. I personally don't make any of these basket allocation decisions because it's the centralized governance. But the folks in the ecosystem are deciding by looking at a couple different things. One is the size of the asset. Another is the DeFi liquidity. Because when a protocol is handling the basket and the asset management, the liquidity in DeFi matters a lot. And I was actually talking to the Rocket team earlier today because Rocket had, before they made a change 2 weeks ago, which massively opened up the amount of nodes that were available for staking against, there was actually like a bit of a liquidity crunch for ETH in DeFi. And it was actually one of the things that was slowing down the protocol's ability to grow.
Yeah, so you have a certain threshold for liquidity in order to include it in the index, I guess.
Exactly. Yeah. And so it's actually recently governance opted to shift it to be a liquidity index, or sorry, to have liquidity-based index as opposed to the market size of the assets.
Awesome. So what do you think in general now, like maybe going a little bit into the direction of the topic, like can stablecoins become a better collateral for restaking or shared security? For example, your index, the stablecoin index. Like what is the value proposition of the stablecoin index compared to like ETH, for example, as a collateral for providing economic security for AVSs, for example?
Yeah, it's really interesting. At the end of the day, all of these things are marketplaces, and I know I'm actually speaking about things that people are much more experts on. But until at the moment, ETH is a great asset for it, and until there's a bit more demand for some of the supply that's out there, it's hard to say that USDC would be better or EUSD would be better or anything like that. But for things that require a bit more stability as opposed to some of the volatility that comes with ETH, it might be something that's interesting.
Yeah. And obviously, like one of the considerations there is also the centralization of stable coins and like decentralization. So there are more decentralized and more centralized stable coins. Do you think that plays a role, like for shared security and also for your index? Yeah.
100%. At the end of the day, what makes ETH a great asset for any type of security is the fact that it is so decentralized and so secure. Right, and something like USDC, the massive drawback is the blacklist and the ability for a different party to turn off USDC. There are a few stablecoins that have like true decentralized models. LUSD, liquidity. It's one of those ones that's hard to say out loud. Liquidity, is like on the full decentralized side of the spectrum. That's probably the best true thing. The issue is that it doesn't have the scale. The stablecoins on our platform are somewhere in the middle, where the protocol itself is fully decentralized and permissionless and censorship resistant, but the assets that are backing it are centralized, right? It's backed by things like USDC or Tether, and you're kind of relying on, like the pooling effect, where you can hide assets in a crowd and, a regulator isn't going to turn off an entire asset group that affects a whole bunch of people because of one bad actor in it. We saw with Tornado Cash, they turned it off because it was like 90% of the volume, right? But if it's 5% of the volume or 10% of the volume is what's affecting something, there's a theory that would be less likely to be affected by regulators.
So yeah, speaking about the like having different stablecoins there, does it make a difference? Like if you either go like, you can go big on USDC or you only have USDC, and then you have an index. Doesn't it maybe even increase the risk, like to pool different stablecoins together instead of just going for one that you have a high conviction on, for example?
I think that this is actually where some like very traditional finance theories come into play, right? Like diversification is like the classic way to eliminate risks like these. And when you're trying to, especially because all of these stablecoins have different types of backing, although it's kind of converged on overnight repos. separating some of that custodial risk across the different stablecoins is a way to actually eliminate risk in the whole system. So I do think it makes sense to diversify.
Yeah. So which stablecoins are part of the index exactly? Yeah.
So the stablecoin on the Reserve protocol is called USD, the electronic dollar. It's backed by USDC, Tether, and DAI, all being lent out in DeFi, whether it's on Aave or Compound or SDAI.
Yeah, that's cool. And the LUSD is the most decentralized, you said? Like, do you think there will be like a larger market for more decentralized stablecoins soon, actually? Yeah.
I think yes and no. I mean, over the last year, we've seen Solana take off, right? Like taking a step back on like, do people really care about decentralization? I think at the end of the day, there was a talk earlier today about L2's speed versus decentralization. Consumers care about speed. And there's a very, very small segment that cares about the decentralization. And it's kind of up to a variety of other actors in the space to really care about decentralization, hopefully for their own economic interest, because otherwise, like, they're less likely to do it. And so, bringing it back to stablecoins, I think it's pretty similar. You're going to see some people that care about it quite a bit, and it's up to the people that are designing the system to come up with a way to make sure that the economic interests of all of the parties involved are there in order to make sure that it stays decentralized.
Yeah, amazing. Do you think there will be a lot of changes in the stablecoin market still at some point, or do you think the game is pretty much already like decided with USDC and USDT taking most of the market share? Is there even room for more? Obviously, like, yeah, there's diversification. It's like you can take USDC and USDT, but I guess these two are like the biggest of the index as well, right? And DAI probably doesn't even have a high allocation, and it's also backed by USDC mostly. So, yeah, like what's your take on that? Like, is there still room for like more stablecoins?
I think there's an insane amount of room for more stablecoins. The stablecoin space is one of the fastest moving spaces in crypto. At the end of the day, it's like where there's the most consumer adoption, outside of people in rooms like these at crypto conferences, right? And everyone thought that Tether was there. USDC came in. That's kind of old news. But just this last week, Robinhood, Kraken, and a bunch of other folks teamed together to make a stablecoin built on top of Paxos that shares revenue with any of the businesses that are involved. And I actually think it's a really, really interesting model where, if it's on the platform, you get the underlying yield, and if it's off the platform, the people that created it get part of the yield. And there's like a really interesting incentive model to get all of the people in the system participating and staying participating. And so my prediction is that actually USDG will be one of the largest centralized stablecoins in the next 5 years.
Sorry, which one?
USDG. It was it's USD Global or something. But of the fiat-backed stablecoins, I think that one's probably going to become one of the larger players in the space.
All right. That's issued from whom again?
Paxos.
Oh, from Paxos. Yeah. All right.
But in the DeFi space, it's also moving really rapidly, right? Like on our platform, we have there's like 2,000 stablecoins that have been issued. Most of them aren't very big, but there's two that are in the tens of millions of dollar range. In DeFi generally, though, there's new stablecoins that are launched all the time.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, there's also obviously, like Coinbase also launched the CB BTC, and now it's like, yeah, taking market share from WBTC. And basically, that's also a stable representation of an underlying asset, similar like to the USD, right? I guess in that sense, it's pretty similar. Are you guys also looking into BTC at Reserve? Yeah.
We definitely are. One of the challenges with Bitcoin in DeFi is that there isn't any yield, and so it's been really interesting hearing a lot of the talks today about Babylon and I'm blanking on names. It's the end of the day here, but it's interesting seeing some of these potential opportunities for different types of Bitcoin to come into the Ethereum EVM space and have some kind of yield to it. That's actually not from liquidity pools where there's volatility against the other asset, right? Because no one borrows Bitcoin, no one shorts Bitcoin in DeFi, and that's where a lot of the yield comes from. And so it's pretty interesting to see these new things come into play because it gives the opportunity to create interesting assets with them. Otherwise, you're looking at kind of the traditional AUM fee model, which folks in DeFi haven't loved that much.
Right. Yeah. So that's all the Bitcoin LSTs. I guess that's then probably the next interesting product for you guys to have an index for like LBTC and like Solve BTC and those yield-bearing BTC tokens.
Exactly right. There's, I think another area that's pretty interesting in DeFi for indexes is like different niche areas. Like maybe like all the different BTCs, right? Like CBTC or TBTC. I think Threshold BTC is the more decentralized version. Binance has their own. Like that's like a whole area. Maybe people just don't want to hold a single custody Bitcoin asset, right? They want it split across a couple. But another might be like a smaller area. Like I don't know about all of you, but I don't have time to keep up with memes. I do think it's an interesting thing. Maybe some people would like to be like, I'll throw some money into a whole bunch of memes at once. That's like kind of the other entire end of the spectrum. But you can imagine some different things like that where it takes a lot of time to understand something. And it takes a lot of time to dive into what are the right things. Like for instance, I don't know nearly as much about LRTs as a lot of the folks in this room. But I bet, I would like to have exposure to that space and maybe get a couple of the different tokens in a single asset.
I think a very interesting use case for you is it could actually be like that reserve is kind of a hedge for like some of the restaking risks as well, because you have the governance staking into the indexes. So if there's an index of LRTs, for example, which are exposed to slashing risk, and then you can offset some of that or like hedge some of that risk by having like collateral that's securing the index token, right?
100% right. So the LST index that we have now, that's what the governance layer protects against. And you can imagine the same exact thing for an index of LRTs. If people are worried about not understanding some of the risk vectors like of each specific LRT, they could package them all together and then protect against one of them going down.
Amazing. Yeah, very interesting. And I think we are done for the talk as well. We're going to do the pitch next. Is there anything you still want to share? Like, what are you excited about for the staking space for the next year?
Well, Bitcoin and Ethereum are actually moving again, and I'm very excited for other eyes outside of like the same people to start looking at the space again and be interested in trying to figure out how to get exposure into different areas. And so, I'm personally very focused on the index space. And so I'm expecting a lot more interest to come in and for people not to be experts. And so, anyone that can help non-experts in the space, I think will be poised to take advantage.
Amazing. Cool. Thank you very much, Thomas.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, guys. And yeah, now we do the pitch competition next. That's going to be a really interesting one. I think, Adam is going to announce the first pitch. Do we have all the...